Well, a special welcome to those who are gathered in the cathedral today, and there are a number of people gathered online, which means that when we speak we need to use the microphone so they can hear us. A special welcome as we gather. We care about these important issues, and so when I heard about what the Reverend Dr. Ann has been doing in Brisbane Cathedral, I actually first heard about it because I took students to visit Brisbane Cathedral a few years ago. And not only did they have an amazing tour of the bell tower, which was their most exciting part of that whole trip, they also got to engage with the ministry that Brisbane Cathedral is doing to those who sleep rough around the Brisbane CBD. So it's my great honour. My name is Naomi. I acknowledge that we are Ambunjaran country and we commit ourselves to ongoing reconciliation. It's my great honour to welcome the Reverend Dr. Ann Solari from Brisbane Cathedral to share her experience of ministry with us today. Let's welcome Ann.
I managed to turn it off again. I did. I must have touched it twice. This might be even better. So 15, 16 years ago, I moved up to Brisbane to work as a doctor in Brisbane. So I was a deacon. I still am a deacon at the cathedral, and I moved from this cathedral to St John's Cathedral in Brisbane. When I moved up there, I had promised my children I would try and be an ordinary doctor. Because in Grafton, as many of you know, I was the doctor who looked after the homeless people, the drug addicts, the people who couldn't afford to go to the doctor, everybody who'd been banned from the doctor's surgery. And my surgery was in one of the two little cathedral cottages. And the people waiting to see me waited on the veranda or on the grass outside, which for those of you who know Grafton is in sight of the front of the police station. So everybody was very safe because they weren't going to do stupid things, and they didn't do stupid things. So when I moved up to Brisbane, my children, being a bit proper as teenagers can be, said, why don't you just go and be an ordinary doctor? So for about 12 months, I was an ordinary doctor, and I hated it. It really wasn't my calling. I was actually called and was much more comfortable looking after people who needed me rather than people who wanted to see me. And it's in my life, that's a huge difference. So the second year I was there, I started working with Anglicare, with Mission Australia, with Wesley Mission, with St Vincent's and all the other organisations, most of which are church organisations, or except the Muslim Brothers, who are obviously not a church, but they're very similar, who work together and basically call themselves the Homelessness Services in Brisbane. And it's a team effort, everybody works together. So I started working as a GP with all these organisations, working from homeless shelters, working from sites on the street where the food vans were, working from homeless resource centres. Most days I would visit 3 or 4 sites and do 3 or 4 clinics a day. As a backup, I spent 1 day a week looking after nursing home patients to make sure I could actually pay the school fees and look after the kids properly. And I carried on doing that until my children had finished uni. And then I was glad to let go of it because that was really it's something I love doing, but it's hard work and took a lot out of my week. So about the same time as I moved into working in homelessness, or moved back into working in homelessness as a GP, I actually moved into one of the clergy flats at St John's Cathedral. There's actually, I say one of the flats, there only is one. There's the deanery where the dean lives, and then there's a clergy flat on site as well. And I started renting that. At St John's Cathedral, rough sleepers have always slept on site, but they haven't been allowed to do so. So at that stage, people would come and set up camp on site. The security guards would come round every few hours and throw them off. In Brisbane, it's illegal to sleep rough on the streets or in public spaces. So if you're sleeping on the streets and in public spaces, the police do the same job. Every time they come round, they wake you up and move you on unless they're not in the mood to do it. Okay? So sleepers, it's really quite hard because most private properties employ security guards and the public spaces are covered by the police. But I was then working with these people and trying to improve their lives, trying to get them a place in society where they would be comfortable to actually believe in themselves and be able to move on and do something positive. And at the same time, I was living in a place where we were actively making their lives as hard as possible because we didn't want them dirtying up the cathedral. And I talked to Peter about it because obviously he went to Brisbane before I did, so he was already there. And we actually decided to trial letting them sleep on the cathedral site in designated safe spots. And that worked so well that the trial, I don't know whether we ever stopped doing a trial, did we? And we're talking about 13, 14 years ago we've been doing this and letting them sleep there. And it's been trial and error the whole way. When we first started, people came and people go, and they were actually sleeping on the north side of the cathedral, mainly on a wooden veranda. We found that that really wasn't a very good space for them to be because of the teenagers living in the deanery and young people living in the deanery. That was in close proximity, and for them coming home at night, it was harder. Whereas on my side of the cathedral, on the St Martin's House side, my kids went in a door that was separate to where the sleepers would be sleeping. So at some, we had to move them over from one side to the other. And the biggest reason for doing that is we're a non-smoking site. The veranda they're sleeping on was wooden, and the structure of the building, of the vestry, the chair vestry, was wooden. And when we told them they couldn't smoke on it, all they did was get cardboard boxes and hide behind the cardboard boxes. And we were really quite worried about that was going to go up in smoke one day. So we actually said, if you smoke here, you're not going to be able to sleep here. And they carried on smoking there. So we actually put up signs saying you can't sleep here. And they've all moved over to the much prettier, nicer looking side of the cathedral. And that worked really well, but because we were interacting with them, and I was interacting with them at work, one of the really hard things for people who don't have a home and who have to sleep rough, these people don't have anywhere to store their possessions. Can you imagine how your life would be if every morning you woke up, you had to pick up your bed, roll it up, carry it under your arm, and then go to housing, and then go to Centrelink, go and find somewhere who was going to give you some food, go to the shops. It's actually almost undoable. And so what they used to do was hide the bedding in the bushes or under the veranda, often on our site, and we would be forever dragging them out and putting them in or by the skip. So we actually decided to trial us looking after the bedding. And that's a trial we haven't stopped yet, because we found it was really successful. It also gave us a bit of control over when they actually came to sleep. We could say, you can sleep here from 6 o'clock at night, and we would get the blankets out at 6 o'clock. If there's, say, the Chrism Eucharist that starts at 7, and we know we're going to have a church service going till 9, we can say, we're going to let you sleep here from 9 and not get the blankets out till 9 o'clock. So we benefited from that arrangement, but they benefited more because we then washed the pillowcases, washed the sheets. If the blankets were really smelly, we would hang them out in the sun for 24, 48 hours until they didn't smell. We actually looked after stuff. So they actually had clean bedding. They guaranteed the bedding was there. And we always made sure we had more bedding than we needed. So we actually got into a relationship where they began to trust us. And we got into, originally, we used to get all the bedding out of what we call the annex. That was when we moved it off the pile outside where they were leaving it. And then it seemed easier just to let them do it. I can't remember the last time I carried the mattresses outside. They actually come in every evening at the right time. I open the door, or whoever there's opened the door, and it may be the dean, he does quite a good job at opening doors too. And they come in, they get the bedding out, they get shouted at if they're too concentrating on getting exactly what they want and fighting. And, you know, that's when I put my foot down and so I say, stop, put everything down, somebody take the wheelbarrow out, somebody take that pile out, you know, so we can get stuff outside. So for the last 10 years, we've been using what we call the annex, which is a little room on the end of one of the halls, and we store mattresses, pillows, blankets, sheets, towels there that come out every night. We recognised that they needed things like sanitary protection, because we have men and women. They need things like toothbrushes, soap, things like that. So we started taking donations of those, and initially every night I would put a tray out. Anglicare moved off our site several months ago. How long? The end of last year sometime, wasn't it, they went? They had been collecting groceries for us to give to the homeless, and they had this beautiful little house-shaped cupboard that you see that on the streets that people put books in, you know, for the street libraries. They had this made for them to put their groceries in, and they moved without it. So I took it. So we moved it to my side of the cathedral and put it against the cathedral wall, and that's where we put toiletries and shoes and donations we get. The interesting thing is, I'm not the only person putting things in now. We have people coming just in off the street, and I don't recognise most of them, and they put toiletries in, or they put clothes in, or they put some items of food in, the same as all those, you know, those community things for collecting things. Just by putting that there, people have actually put donations straight into us, which for me, I find amazing, because it means I don't have to remember to do it every day. We also are part of the national scheme of the sanitary towel collections, so we get delivered those whenever we need them. You know, we have plenty of sanitary towels, we have plenty of tampons, because there is a huge need for those on the streets. Because people can afford to buy them some of the time, but some of the time usually isn't when your period starts. So for some women, they are life-saving. Peter thought he had a disaster a few weeks ago when this woman arrived, creating havoc, wanting, you know, needing and all she wanted was a packet of sanitary pads. And he just showed her where they were, and the situation just went. You know, she thought she was going to have to try and get money out of us, and to be shown where she can just help herself to what she needed immediately diffused the situation. So we have been putting snacks out for several years. That all changed about 15 months ago when we realised that, and this was our first Christmas properly out of COVID, we suddenly realised that from just before Christmas until almost the end of January, a lot of the services that provide breakfast, lunch and dinner in Brisbane weren't providing them. There was 10 days when the only meal homeless people would have access to on the street was breakfast at 6:30 in the morning, because all the resource centres were shut, and a lot of the vans, their volunteers were on holiday, so they weren't running. So gradually during January they were coming back online, but the van that serves us comes twice a week, a food van comes with dinner twice a week, wasn't coming until the first week of February. And that happened again this year. And we thought, what are we going to do? And the obvious answer is Anne can make sandwiches. So the first night, the first day after Christmas, I'm not sure if I think it was Boxing Day, there was me making sandwiches for homeless people. I thought I had made a lot of sandwiches, but they came in, ate the sandwiches and said, where are the rest? So I had to make more sandwiches. The second night I thought, this is stupid, I hate making sandwiches. So I said to Peter, do you think it would be all right, would the wardens object if I let the homeless people into the kitchen to make their own sandwiches? So he said, no, I don't think so. And we looked at it, and these were people that we've known for quite a while. They trust me because I've been working as their doctor for so long. I have street cred. So if I say something, they will accept that that probably is true. So if I say you can't do that, they might argue, but they probably won't do it, which is a benefit in life. Also, and people will back me up. So we invited them in, and that first night they came in, they made their sandwiches, they made themselves coffee and tea, because if you're in the kitchen, the kettle's there and the mugs are there, you can't say, no, you can only make a sandwich. You have to say, yes, of course you can make a cup of coffee. So what we then said, so they came in, they made their sandwiches, they got their hot drinks, they went outside, and for the first time ever, they sat down to eat their sandwiches and they talked to each other. We have actually never seen them operate as a community together. Since that day, we have opened our kitchen whenever we can. And we don't do sandwiches because nobody likes making sandwiches. So what we do is we have our food van that comes in twice a week. So on Wednesdays and Fridays, we just open the kitchen. Wednesdays and Sundays, we open the kitchen for coffee and cake. So the coffee, the tea, the Milo, thanks to Churchy, the Church of England Grammar School, who provided us with a year's supply of Milo last year. We hope they're going to do it again this year, but I've got to talk to them first. So they come in, they make their drinks, they eat the cakes. Terry, one of our parishioners, he and his partner Rod run a group called Coffee on Wednesdays Cows, which is our failed play group. 15 years ago, we started a play group because the parents wanted a play group. That worked for term 4. Term 1, all the kids had gone to school, gone to daycare, and the parents had got work on Wednesday mornings. But the volunteers all turned up for their coffee. And ever since, we have had coffee and refreshments, which has grown and grown, and it is a big thing now for our community and for visitors on a Wednesday morning in the cathedral. So Terry makes cakes for cows, coffee on Wednesday, which is why it's called Cows. And he now makes 2 or 3 extra cakes for the rough sleepers. So they get homemade cake. Churchy Year 5, last year, one of the classes chose to make cakes every week for the homeless. So they would produce 2 cakes later on in the week. So we have homemade cakes. We have our snacks, things like muesli bars and cans of tuna that they can help themselves to on a Wednesday and a Sunday. Monday, they come in, and some of my volunteers serve up chicken, which is provided by another parishioner, brings a tray of cooked chicken every Sunday, and she then gets bread and rolls out of the freezer. We have to say no to bread and rolls these days because we get too much of it. She brings in salad and ham, and they make themselves a salad or they make themselves rolls with that. Tuesday, for a long time, the meditation group has had homemade bread and soup, and we just double the amount we make for that. That's the royal we. I make the soup and the bread. But making double the amount of soup and bread is actually not hard work. And they share bread and soup with the meditation group. Not many of them sit down and eat it at the same table. Most of them choose to go outside. But they talk to our meditation group people who have come to have supper before meditation. And it does both groups the world of good. It's amazing to see that happening. Wednesdays, as I say, is just coffee and cake. Thursday, we have a cooked meal. And South Brisbane Rotary, once a fortnight, are making a cooked meal for us this year. And I just have to wait for somebody to donate me one. I'll make pasta bake myself. Friday, the same thing happens unless there's a concert on. Saturday, the same thing happens unless there's a concert on. And we find that the rough sleepers, who were people we didn't really know, who we said hello to, who came in, gruffly took the bedding, settled themselves down, put the blankets over their heads, have become people. They are people who come in, they talk to us, they say hello, they say whether they've had a good day, they say whether they've had a bad day. They clean the kitchen up to the best of their ability. Some of them have no ability to clean up, and cleaning up means you spread the Milo from a pile there, from that side of the counter to the other side of the counter. Others with OCD, if I would let them, would clean the whole kitchen with the spray, including the floor, even though the cleaners are due in after we've been there. So, it's very variable what they can do, and we let them use whatever crockery and cutlery they want, or plastic if they prefer that, and they take it outside, and we trust them to leave it there. They come in, they get their stuff, and people who have been in jail or hospital talk about coming home. which on one level is really, really sad, to think that sleeping rough at the cathedral is the only home you've got. On the other hand, we can say at least they've got somewhere where they're part of community, where they feel connected, where they know that there are people who care about them. We've also noticed that they actually, if they haven't seen somebody for a while, they say, have you seen Nathan? Or do you know where Dean is? Because we haven't seen him. You know, so they are actually care about each other on a different level from just wanting to keep away from somebody or, you know, that sort of, or get something from somebody. So we've actually created a community. And it's not the same people there every night. We've got our nucleus, and we've got people who sleep with us every week, but not every night. And it's actually been an amazing change in their lives. This time last year, we got a thank you card from a group of homeless people. So for homeless people to actually get a card and actually get a group of people, I don't know how many people had signed that card, Pete, but it was a significant percentage of the people there. But for them to actually do something which we would think was normal, but to actually do that together was actually amazing. Because, you know, the whole time we've been doing stuff for them, they say thank you, but they've actually never actually come up with a symbol of saying, you know, of giving us thanks in something. I now have homeless people who arrive with groceries that they've got from the free food pickups that they can't use, but they know we can use. So they bring in snacks to go on the trolley. They bring in loaves of bread to go in the freezer, which is why I don't take loaves of bread from other people, because I don't want to say no to people who are going to use it. It needs to go, that needs to go in our freezer. They bring bags of rice and things, you know, it's actually useful stuff that we can use. And they actually say, oh, who made this? This is good. So they said, did you make this shepherd's pie on Thursday? I said, no, you know I don't make shepherd's pie. I make pasta bake or rice dishes. They said, well, whoever did it is a bloody good cook. Can you tell her? Interesting, not that you could tell him. They picked it was a mother's cooking, and it wasn't her who did it. You know, and they actually, you know, they interact with us in a way. And these are people who are the bottom of the heap. So the homeless people we are dealing with in Brisbane, in the city, are not the families that are being made homeless at the moment. Okay? Since the new housing crisis has happened, we've only had one family turn up to sleep one night. And that's because the services like the food vans and the support services are actually moving out into the suburbs, because it is much safer for families to sleep in the suburbs than to come into city where most of the homeless people are using drugs and alcohol, where a lot of them have been in jail. There's a lot of, you know, it's easy to rile somebody up and get hit. You know, where things are not safe, things get stolen all the time. We've had a bad fortnight when we had 3 women over 55 who were sent to sleep at the cathedral in the space of 2 weeks. One was only 55, the other 2 were in their 70s. And the rough sleepers hated having them there because they were worried that they would be held responsible if somebody come and did something or one of them died during the night. They said, that lady's really old. What happens if she gets sick and she dies? Are they going to blame us? You know, they could see that older women who had never been homeless before and suddenly lost housing should not be sleeping rough on the cathedral. So Valerie, that would people like you who just lost their house.
No, I'm disbelieving. Can you tell us how this comes about?
Because they were living, oh, I forgot about that's not on me. Because they were living. Okay. They were living in private rental, they were all in private rental accommodation, and in all the situations, the landlord, for some reason or other, had discontinued their lease. It was the end of the lease period, it was all legal, it was they wanted to sell or they wanted to move back. And they had been around there, and there was no, they were people who were isolated, who didn't have family who were in a position to take them in. And they suddenly became homeless. They had used up the government, the housing allowance of 2 or 3 nights that you can have in a motel. And while you've try and find a place in a hostel or housing tries and found somewhere, and there was nowhere for them to go. And the agencies said go to the cathedral because they knew it was safer than anywhere else if you had to sleep rough. One of the ladies, she'd lost her car, something had happened to the car that she'd been sleeping in. You know, it's stuff that could happen to anyone. And that hasn't happened since then. We talked to a lot of people about that. We spread that story. And so obviously they're doing, you know, there is a lot of those loopholes have actually now been closed because it's not uncommon for anybody to suddenly use their rental accommodation, and people can't afford. I mean, the rents are more than Centrelink income. That's what the issue is. There are very few properties coming up in Brisbane that if you are a single person, that you can afford to rent. You know, so it's no fault of theirs. It's just that if you do not have friends and family to take you in, there may be nowhere for you to go. And that is horrendous. So we are not seeing those people. We are seeing your traditional rough sleepers. So the traditional rough sleepers are the ones that have been in Grafton. They were here when I came in 88. They were still here when I left 20 years later. And they are the people who have, 2/3 of them have diagnosed mental health conditions, okay? 2/3 of them will have active drug and alcohol issues. Most of them will have had drug or alcohol issues at some stage in their lives. They are homeless not because of their mental illness, not because of their drug and alcohol issues, but because their families can't cope anymore. Or their families aren't there anymore, or they were in a relationship and they had to move out because the relationship was violent. You know, there's all these sort of issues. Or they went to jail and they came out of jail and their family didn't take them back, or there was nowhere for them to come back to. So they're a specific group in our society of people who are vulnerable. What we know from a lot of research is of the females in this group, now the females are the minority in this group. Females are protected because they have kids. And if you have kids, our government are much better at looking after you. Single women are less protected. It's much easier to become homeless. But even then, you get housed better and much quicker as a woman than a man because you're more vulnerable. But if you are a woman who has been in jail, a woman who is homeless, there is over a 97% chance that you have been abused either physically, sexually, emotionally as a child and or a teenager and or a young woman. So nearly all of them. That small percentage that haven't are usually the people who have been in jail for things like embezzling and things like that. It's the fraud, you know, the people who defraud, which is, I mean, a lot of them have been abused because a lot of the general population have. But the people who are the hopeless people on the streets are hopeless for good reason. The men, before the Royal Commission, the men admitting to abuse was probably at about the 75% mark. We actually know that now of the people we're seeing, at least 94% will admit that they've been abused in some way as younger people, because it's becoming, people are now not as ashamed to let people know that they were abused as kids. You know, particularly those of us they'll trust, they will tell us their stories. And the number that have horrific stories of childhood or adolescence of abuse is frightening. So what we know is one of the factors that leads people to chronic homelessness is that sense that they're unlovable. These are the kids who never had somebody who gave them the sense of unconditional love. Or they did, and then they were sexually abused. You know, when people are sexually abused, it makes them question who they are. You know, and they think these are the people who know there is something wrong with them because they're unlovable. They've been used by other people, they've been abused by other people, and they know that they're not acceptable to society. But they look like ordinary kids, they look like ordinary people. So these are the kids when they reach 12, 13, 14, and life gets hard, if they are unlucky and they're exposed to drugs or alcohol, they will use drugs or alcohol, and they will find when they're using them that they feel normal, they feel part of society, they feel as if they belong. So they don't deal with the bad stuff. Every time something goes wrong, they will go back to the drugs and alcohol. So you have adults who have the emotional ability to cope of a 12, 13-year-old, because that's when they stop learning how to cope, and they learn the drugs and alcohol take it away, which is why there is so much drug and alcohol in that group of society, and particularly in the homeless. It's not the cause of them being homeless. It's one of the results of them not feeling loved and accepted as kids and young people. Does that make sense? Which is why, as Christians, as people walking in the way of Christ, we believe it's our job to make them feel cared for and accepted. You know, they need to be known as people, as individuals, and know that we actually care about them and notice them. You know, and it's little things that make the difference. I know that some people love a particular food. Like I know, we've got a young guy, and I know he likes tuna in oil. Nobody else likes tuna in oil, so it's not a hard job for me to make sure that I only put the tuna in oil out when he's there. Or he says, "Where's the tuna?" I will miraculously find some in oil. You know, which is what you do for your kids. You know, I often feel as if I'm cooking and serving dinner for 20 teenagers, because that's how you behave. And when they have pasta bake, you have to put cheese on it. They won't, you know, if you put cheese on it, they love it. And they love it even more if the bag of grated cheese left over is next to it, so they can put even more cheese on it. And if you give them cheese, they love you. And we have a really quiet evening. And you can make it even better if somebody has given you chocolate brownies. Because he's nodding over there. Because pasta and cheese followed by chocolate brownies will keep any teenage boy happy for several hours. But it's stuff like that matters to them because nobody else does it for them. Okay, we have the ability to do that, yeah? Okay, the toilets is a sad situation. Okay, so on the cathedral site, we have a toilet block. So it's a traditional toilet block, men, women. Door, you open the door, which we can lock, and it goes into this large area with 3 or 4 wash hand basins. Actually, I think it's 2 or 3, not 3 or 4, I'm exaggerating, and the toilet stalls off, which are locked. You know, you have your normal lock on your toilet door. The problem with that is safe during the day when people are around and people who are going in and out. At night, you open that door to go into the first bit where the wash hand basins are. You have no idea who's in there as you go in. So risk number 1 is you're walking into this space, you don't know who's there. You then walk in, you then have to open another door, and you've got no idea if anybody's behind that. You then go to the toilet, and you have to unlock the door and come out into a space before you go outside. And we've found from experience that our toilets are not safe to leave open, and our cleaners lock them after they've cleaned them at about 9 o'clock. We even found people in the roof space one day, sleeping, but somebody put their leg, was it their leg or their arm through, Peter? I can't, it was their leg through. And they were so inebriated they couldn't get their leg out of the hole they made to go through the manhole again, which is why we found them, because there was a leg. I'm not quite sure how long they'd been up there. I didn't believe the person who came to tell us there was a leg in the roof of the ladies' toilets, particularly as it was a male leg. Over the road, so yeah, we leave ours open to 9 and reopen them between 6 and 7 in the morning. Over the road, the council has built this lovely toilet block, which is 3 stalls, a disabled, a male and a female, which are just toilets with doors, so there's only one in and out, and it's into the outdoor space, which is well lit, just off Ann Street, which is one of the main streets. The wash hand basin is on the outside of the block. They lock theirs at 6 o'clock at night and open it at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's designed to be safe. How many communications have we had with the council now, Mr. Dean? Several. We have one of our parishioners who is writing to councillors weekly. Our only hope is that South Brisbane, in the park over there, they've got theirs open, but they had a Greens councillor. So my suggestion would be, if you know anybody in Brisbane City, if they could vote for the Greens councillor, we might get ours open as well. You know, that's the only difference between us and them. We're actually thinking we're going to actually have to hire a portaloo. At the moment, we're letting them urinate into the drain, and I hose the drain out every morning. Faeces is another matter. We haven't got anywhere nice for them to go to the toilet properly. So occasionally we have to clear that up. Showering, we are a sleep site, we're not a showering site. So the resource centres all have showers. So Third Space, which is the one nearest to us, which used to be called 139 Club, is open from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30, and they have showers and day beds and things there. Emmanuel City Mission over the road, and that's 7 days a week they're open. Emmanuel City Mission is open 6 days, I think. There are cold showers off the swimming area at South Bank. There's all the cycle centres have showers as well. Some canny people actually get a 24-hour gym membership, so they've got 24-hour shower access and a locker, which I thought was quite a novel idea. They never exercise. They just go in and use the shower facilities, and then they come, then they come out again. So yes, so we have a problem with that. Yep.
You mentioned that they regard the cathedral as home. So does that mean they can get mail sent there or have an address? Because I know a lot of government services people cannot, such as drug and alcohol ones, they can't access unless they've got an address.
All our resource centres allow people to have their mail sent to them, so that's not a need in Brisbane. Lockers is a huge need, but we cannot store bags and lockers. We would have to have a full-time person to do that. Yeah.
Without an address, they cannot access any government services.
Yeah, we know that, but yes. But the post office here lets you use the post office in Grafton. That's what we used to tell them to do before. And I think we had some people use the cathedral address at times, didn't we?
So it looks like we're opening up the floor to questions a bit.
I thought we had already, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like that's already
I thought I'd
happening.
noticed, yeah.
I'm going to pass around the mic as we go.
What's the cathedral policy on alcohol and drug use? For
No,
people inside?
shall I laugh? Yeah. No alcohol and drug use, no smoking, when we're there to watch you. It's pretty drugs we ban. I mean, smoking, we tell them to move out to the street every time we see them. It's really, really difficult. They all smoke. I don't like smoking. It's my lounge room above where you're smoking is what I tell them. And some of them, the better ones, and you can tell the ones who are ready to get long-term places to live because they go and smoke out of the street. We've got some people who go out the whole time and keep the rules. The big problem is this is rough sleeping on the streets. They're not in an enclosed space. We don't lock them in, so we can't lock people out. So the drug users still bring drugs in. Drugs are a huge problem. If we find people using drugs or with drug paraphernalia, they get banned. For how long depends on them, because they get a lifetime ban that is only revoked when they make an appointment to see the Dean and come and say sorry and promise not to do it again, which is quite hard to do when your life is totally disorganised.
When I was a student, at one of my placements, I started looking at how can we accommodate rough sleepers in our church, on church grounds.
Yeah.
And was stopped very quickly saying church insurance wouldn't allow it. Has that been an issue for you?
They're not in our buildings. They're outside the buildings. I mean, our insurance people would tell us if it was a problem, wouldn't it, Mr. Dean? I mean, we're underneath their office. We store their stuff, we don't store them. We let them into the kitchen and they're supervised, but we let the choir in the kitchen, we let MU into the kitchen, we let, a huge number of groups into the kitchen. They are just another church group doing what a normal church group does.
And outside, they're covered by our third-party policy, just like everybody else.
There are those who will use those sort of mechanisms to stop things happening because they actually don't want them to happen. But there is actually no reason. If you're hosting them inside, you've got a completely different kettle of fish and you've got a whole lot of duty of care. But if you're just not throwing people off, which is what we're doing, we're just not throwing people off, it doesn't actually affect your insurance.
And what we've noticed is that more and more churches in our diocese, it's not a lot of them, but a lot of churches will have 1 or 2 people sleeping in their outdoor spaces or on their verandas. It's because we're talking about it, it's actually becoming more common. And I regularly talk to people just randomly phone from all over the country to say, how are you managing to do this or how are you managing to do that? Okay? St. Stephen's in Brisbane, they were letting them stay all day and set tents up. After they talked to us, they stopped doing that. Because the way it works is we are actually honest with them and say, look, we rely on people hiring our building for concerts to actually be able to have the building up running. If we don't keep the place looking nice, we don't get any concerts, we don't get any weddings, we don't get the stuff that generates money for us. So therefore we won't be here for you. So therefore you actually have to work with us on this. If you start breaking the rules, you can't, it's going to stop. So we actually explain why they can't come on at certain times. It's like when it's on Christmas Day when we say you can't be here till 1 o'clock because church doesn't finish until 1 o'clock, We actually explain to them why it's happening and we say, look, we respect that you need this. We do it as often as we can, but we're a church. And we don't pretend that we're not a church. So we don't put them any higher than the MU, but we don't put them any lower than anybody else. Their rights are the same as the choir's rights. Yeah, they are a church group. They have become part of our community. And do you know what? Some of them even come in the church. Our evensong attendance has gone up by, on average, 1.5 people a week, because we do have homeless people who do come to church. And they come randomly any time. This year we put a coffee table in the church every day during the week. And this was because for work, health and safety stuff, the staff kitchen had to become the staff kitchen and our volunteers had taken it over and they couldn't, that was unfair on the office staff. So we had to move their morning tea over, so the table went in for that reason, but we decided just to open it to anyone. And we've actually found we have homeless people, mentally ill people come and just will get a cup of coffee during the day and things like that. So actually people are coming in, they actually come and sit and pray, or they sit and reflect, or they walk the labyrinth, or they do stuff. They do spiritual stuff. And it's interesting, I was in there on Friday and this guy who was obviously psychotic and was talking to himself, and in the past he would have been fiddling with all our stuff in the cathedral, moving stuff, stressing the guide, stressing the shop people. He was just sitting at the table talking to himself, stirring his tea, round and round and round. So it's actually given some of those people a space where they can be in a worship space but without upsetting anybody else, because they found something they can just do and sit there, which is socially acceptable. So we benefit. And I think our community has benefited, haven't they? I have never asked anybody to give us money, but we had enough money given to us that we could buy a storage shed to keep the surplus of blankets and pillows that are given to us. Actually, pillows, I lie. We don't never get a surplus of pillows. But blankets, sleeping mats, sleeping mags, stuff. So I can say yes when people suddenly offer me 100 sleeping bags. And we got 100 sleeping bags from a charity earlier this year who had been doing camps for kids with cancer in tents. So they had sleeping bags and mats. And the camp had been, for various reasons, had been moved into cabins. And they gave us all this new stuff that they don't use. And because we had a shed, we could put it all in. Yes, we do ask for blankets and stuff like that, but we've got to the stage now that I rarely need to put appeals out for most stuff because we actually get more than we need most of the time. And the interesting thing is, as soon as we've got more than we need, bloody homeless people don't steal it anymore. And so, they actually give us more, we actually get more. It's amazing, that we actually have more mattresses than we've been given on site at the moment.
So how many people would you have there on an average night?
15 to 25, sometimes up to 30.
And do you have sort of a turnover?
Yes.
So some get housed or some, does that happen?
They're very okay. So homelessness is a very fluid situation. Homeless means you haven't got a home, so you haven't got a stable base where you've got a sleeping space, an eating space, a toilet and washing space, a cooking space, somewhere to socialise and to store stuff. It doesn't mean you're unroofed the whole time. Okay, so there are the homeless shelters in Brisbane where you can go into for a few weeks or a few months and try and work towards getting housing. There are the boarding houses where you can go, where you can rent a room cheaply, but the problem is the other people in the boarding house. So these are like school boarding houses, but the people who live in them all have histories of being homeless for reasons, and all have drug and alcohol issues, behavioural issues, mental health issues, have been in jail. They're those sort of people. And people with a short fuse find they can't survive in there more than a few days because they get thrown out for fighting. Or stuff gets stolen. There's a whole lot of reasons why people don't feel safe in them, so they won't move into them. Or they try them, it doesn't work, and they come out. There's a lot of people who are homeless, are couch surfing, so they spend some of the time sleeping in other people's places, and then they get thrown out of that after a few days because you really don't want them as guests for very long. Or the people who are paying the rent leave because they can't put up with the people who have taken over their house. So people come and go, and it also depends what you're doing during the day. You may not want to be in our bit of the city that day because you're down at the Gold Coast doing something, or you're at the beach, or it's South Bank and you don't feel like walking back over the bridge, so you'll sleep somewhere else. So we have the stable, rough sleepers who are there nearly every night. Okay, so we've got Len and Mark who are always there. And if they're not going to be there, they tell us, I'm going to rent a hotel room tonight because I feel I feel if I need a good shower and a nice sleep. Okay, and they use their Centrelink payment for that, for a weekend or something like that. Mark doesn't because he's a Kiwi, so he doesn't get any Centrelink. But they are stable people who could live in accommodation and for various reasons can't. The others go from varying degrees of dysfunction. We have some people who just rock up at 2 o'clock in the morning, see people lying down asleep, so they lie down on the grass or on a spare blanket. They have no plans, they just arrive. And we don't feed them. So some nights you get out in the morning and it's obvious, 30 people have slept there and there were only 15 when you went to bed at night because people rock up. So it is very fluid. So the community we know is far bigger than the, say, 20 average we get a night. At 20 at the moment, numbers are up. A few weeks ago, the average was about 12. It's totally variable. And sometimes we don't know why. Some nights we can open up and there will be 3 people there. That doesn't happen very often. I can remember the occasion this year.
So
Yeah.
it's very different somewhere like Grafton, though, because they're not the other services for people.
There are lots of other services. We don't have a hostel where you can just go in for the night.
No, but also we don't have, as far as I'm aware anyway, places where they can go to, like, that are open through the day where they can have showers or have a lie down
No,
or something like
no.
that.
And that's a function. So the percentage of the population that is homeless is probably very similar in Brisbane as Grafton, but Grafton is much, much smaller than Brisbane. And what you have to remember is nearly all the resource centres are in specific places. So we're in the city, there are a lot of resource centres based in City Fortitude Valley, which is where all ours are, on the border between the city and Fortitude Valley, or over in South Brisbane. Okay, and then there's another lot up at Deception Bay, Caboolture, because that's another service hub. So the long-term homeless will gravitate to those areas rather than stay out in the suburbs. And when they travel around the country, they will come to those areas. And if we suddenly start housing people, we suddenly get people from Melbourne and Sydney arriving. You know, when they release, what's happened recently is the housing that was promised by our state government in 2012 has suddenly come online. So a lot of people got housed and a lot of people moved in to take their places. You know, and that's just how it works. You've got them, but it's the percentage is low.
And how do you manage their medical conditions? Like,
I don't anymore. I've retired as a doctor.
So, but in terms of the cathedral staff, like in terms of people fitting or collapsing or being...
Well, basically, we're interacting them for the half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. When we let the blankets out, get them in, let them make their supper and things like that. So we're not there for most of the time that they're there. So they get managed as they would be on the street. So they self-manage a lot of the time, and most homeless people don't fit. Okay, a lot of homeless people use drugs, go blah, 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 and are stupid and often wander off, and we find their bags they've left behind the next day, and they don't know where they left their stuff anyway. So, you know, we keep them for 24 hours and then get rid of them, because that's all we can do. If we take any ID out, anything important, but other bags, we don't keep their possessions, because we would have so many possessions we'd be smelt out of home within 2 days. So most of those will just fall asleep, and we have the fun of trying to wake them up in the morning. I am asked a lot for advice on what they should do, which is a doctor who hasn't paid her registration fees because she doesn't want to be able to treat people. I'm not allowed to give medical advice, but I am a qualified first aider, so I am allowed to give medical advice, you know, from that point of view, and I can say, you need to take that to a GP tomorrow, or you need to go to the hospital now. And they say, well, I'll go tomorrow. I've got a mattress, I'm not leaving it. You know, that sort of thing. So yeah, and it's like anything, it's just talking about what the problem is and sorting it out. And within the homeless sector, most things aren't emergencies. Most of the health problems within the homeless sector is general practice stuff. It's about finding a GP, working with your GP to manage your blood pressure, your heart failure, your diabetes, your skin conditions, to get not only to go to the doctor and get your antibiotics, script, but to actually go to the pharmacy and get the tablets. And if you haven't got the money, to tell them where to go to and who will pay for it. And I still have the ability to phone up a pharmacy in the valley and get it put on an account. Because one of our I can talk to you here because none of you are from Brisbane, just don't listen. The people who are from Brisbane. The parish church in the valley has a pantry, okay? And they also do emergency relief, and they pay pharmacy bill. They pay for stuff, the pharmacy and things like that. But we actually pay the bill for the pharmacy at the cathedral, because we get, and as our contribution to what they do for our sleepers is, that gives me the ability to phone the pharmacy up and say, this one, can you put it on the account? And nobody will argue with me, because this is a private, the government doesn't pay this account. The cathedral pays this account. We don't publicise that, but I always have the discretion to be able to get somebody essential medication. So I'm not going to pay for their painkillers or their Valium. Things like antibiotics or diabetic drugs, things that anybody would pay for. Yes, I mean, obviously, this is a special case because I was a doctor, and I was their doctor, and they don't abuse it. They all know that I'm not registered as a doctor anymore. But they will ask me for advice whether it's urgent or not urgent. And sometimes they even go to the hospital when I tell them to.
Any last questions before we finish up? Well then, I might just take the opportunity. I think what I've been hearing Anne talk about is quite specific, coming from Anne's own skill base. And There's a theologian, Frederick Bruckner, who talks about vocation being using what we're already good at for the love of the world. So as we stand in here, we might not all be skilled at medicine or supporting people who are rough sleeping, but we all have our own skills. And so vocation is when we're kind of putting them into work. And so it's really inspiring to hear how someone has taken what they're good at and used it for the love of the world. So thank you so much, Anne, for sharing that with us. And I know that you're always open for conversation and questions, and I know that because she answers my calls when I reach out. But thank you for making some time to be with us at Grafton Cathedral, and there'll be people online watching. I do have something little to say thank you. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much.